Hello YouTube. So it seems there's been a few video responses to me lately. One by Thomistic Disputations and another by Christian Idealism. On top of that, my channel has been advertised on Relay Theology's Twitter. As a result of this exposure, I went from less than 20 subs to over 50 subs, which is cool, I guess. In any case, today I'll be responding to TD's stream response to me. Christian Idealism will come after, as right now, for Christian Idealism, I plan to make a collab response, and I'll probably have a discussion in the near future with both of them, so stay tuned for that as well. So TD's response is a 2-hour live stream. Don't worry, I don't think this response will be 2 hours long. I'll just cut out the parts of interest and offer my rejoinder to those. Let us begin.
He says there are first cause. It could be that there are first causes of change. So it seems to me like his objection here is that there are multiple, or there could be multiple first causes of the change, and not just one. And so that's how I interpreted it. I suppose if you think about it, you could also interpret it as saying that, well, what he actually means is that the first cause of change could also be in a process of change, because he says at the end that is not itself in the process of change. I don't think that's what he was saying. In that case, I would just say, well, yeah, I mean, that's not, well, I would say that would probably fall more under the idea that it has to be purely actual, which I would also say is argued for in I believe it's later in the Summa. I don't remember where it is. Anyway, I would also say, St. Thomas Aquinas is not arguing that it has to be purely actual. And, I mean, it couldn't really be in the process of change if it's the first changer, because then it would need a change itself. So, something to change it. So I don't know how that would be invalid. But the other thing about it is that he then says, well, then you could have, a different first purely actualizer for each of the causal changes, but that would be more than one, just one first cause, and maybe saying, oh well, but it would be one first cause for each of the changes. But that's not what St. Thomas is arguing for when he argues that the first cause has to be one, right? He's arguing that since it's purely actual, it cannot have you can't have two different purely actual beings. So you can't have one that causes one chain and another one that causes another chain. And you can argue that argument doesn't work, and that's fine, that we can talk about that. But the point is that the first way isn't arguing that the first cause is one. That's going to be argued for later in the Summa.
Right, so TD's response is pretty confusing to me here. I still think it's likely that he's just not understanding the objection. So, what Oppy is saying is not merely that the argument doesn't get you to a being of pure act, nor is he saying that the first cause of all of change could be multiple beings. Rather, he's saying that the argument is invalid, as in the conclusion is not entailed by the premises. The argument concludes that there is a first cause of all of change that is not in any process of change, or a first mover that is not moved by anything else. It can be seen quite clearly that this is the conclusion that Aquinas is trying to get at in this first way. And just to make this clear, I'll quote two translations of the conclusion of the first way and link both in the description. First, from newadvent.org, quote, "Therefore it is necessary to arrive at a first mover put in motion by no other," end quote. Next, from a translation by Lawrence Shapcott, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, quote, "Therefore it is necessary to stop at some first mover which is moved by nothing else," end quote. The problem is none of the previous premises establish this conclusion. for all the previous premises entail, it could be that each change could have a separate cause, and such a cause could be in a process of change in some other respect unrelated to the causal chain in question. TD's point that Aquinas argues later in the Summa that there can be more than one cannot be more than one purely actual being is also just irrelevant here, since what our criticism shows is that the argument doesn't get us to a purely actual cause at all. Rather, each chain can have a separate terminus, which is itself unchanging and does not have a further cause of change with respect to the chain in question. But this does not mean it can't have potencies in other respects, or it can't just be an unactualized actuality rather than, pure actuality, or a being of pure act.
We have something that's potential, so just put a P there, and actual, right? Okay, these things are together, they're one thing. They're a potential and actual being. All right, so this potentiality here is going to depend on something actual. And here's the thing, I think he has this idea that, well, it could depend on this actuality, right? But that's not really going to work, because the potentiality here is going to have to be something different from the actuality here. So, for example, let's say we have one being, and its potential with respect to heat, and it's, so if it's potential with respect to heat, the actuality here cannot have heat, right? Because otherwise, if it were actual with respect to the heat, then it would already have that actuality. So it actually has to be lacking the heat. So it cannot have heat. It cannot have, I don't know how to write that. Anyway, so it has to have something prior to it, which is causing or grounding that actuality, or the potentiality, sorry. And it can't be the actuality of the thing itself, because, I mean, sure, it could have a disposition towards the potentiality in a sense, but what does it mean for something to have potentiality for heat if there's nothing in the universe that could actualize that heat? I mean, I would say that's not really a potentiality at all. Like, if it's impossible, it would be impossible for that potentiality to be actualized. So you actually need something prior to it, which is actual with respect to the heat. But, okay, so then we'll say, okay, fine, this is purely actual with respect to heat, but it has another potentiality, and this potentiality is potential with respect to, I don't know, let's see, potential with respect to whiteness, let's say. All right, okay, well, the actuality cannot be actual with respect to the potentiality here, so it cannot actualize the whiteness inside of this thing, which is quote-unquote purely actual with respect to heat. So it has to get its this potentiality is going to depend on something which is actual with respect to the heat, or with respect to the whiteness, right? Okay, well, so you see there's going to be an infinite, well, maybe not infinite, but there's going to be a regress here. So as long as you have something that's actual and potential, you're going to have another actuality prior to it. And so if you think there can't be an infinite regress, which, there's reasons to believe that there can't be. See my video on there, why an infinite regress is impossible. Then you're going to have to end up with something which is purely actual without potentiality.
TD comes a little bit closer to at least understanding the point here. So the idea being that you could have a set of chains which each have a terminus which is unactualized or unmovable in the respect of the disposition or property of the given chain, but could have potencies in other respects. Contra what TD says, though, I don't think the terminus has to be purely actual in the relevant respect, as opposed to just being an unactualized actuality, but we can set that aside for now. So TD's objection is basically that you'd have an infinite regress issue here, because each causal antecedent which serves as terminus for a given causal chain will have actuality prior to it. So for example, a terminus for a chain of heat could have potency qua whiteness, and so there would be actuality prior to it in respect of whiteness. So there are a couple things to note here. First of all, TD is just mistaken that this leads to an infinite regress. Ex hypothesi, we'd have a first cause of every per se chain. So each per se chain would have first cause, right? Every property or causal power would terminate in something which exemplifies the actuality of the given property or causal power and does not derive its actuality, qua the particular causal power or property in question, from anything else. It's just that each terminus would have a separate first cause, and each first cause could have potencies in other respects, which would have a separate first cause. But on the view outline, there's still a terminus for every chain, and so there is no infinite regress, right? Because there'd still be an endpoint, a first cause for each chain. So TD's reason to reject the view just doesn't go through. Secondly, this is a slightly less crucial point, but we don't actually need to say that the first cause of a given causal chain has potencies in other respects for this objection to go through. It's enough to just say that each chain would have a separate first cause, or different sets of chains could have a different first cause, as opposed to there being a unique first cause for every chain. As long as that, as what I just said, expresses a possibility, the conclusion of the first way is just blocked, and the argument is therefore invalid. The first way doesn't, even come close to showing that there is a unique first cause of all of change, and I don't think anything TD says here gives us reason to accept that there's a unique first cause of all of change either. But we can just move forward, though.
We have a thing here. Let me see if I can turn something on here. Well, okay, we have a particle here, right? Okay. Or we can say this is a free will even, too. All right, it comes out like this. Here's the different decisions that we can make, okay? We can make decision A, make decision B, we can make decision C, okay? Or we could say, these are different states a particle could come in, different times a particle could come to existence, and to come apart from a decaying atom, or whatever you want to say. These are different possibilities that could be instantiated. None of them are determined by the state of the entity, but they're different things that could come out of it. Now, what I'm going to say is, still, you need some form of actuality with inside the agent. So whenever we're talking about free will in particular, what we need as a foundation, let's see if I can get some text here. What we need as a foundation is going to be the concept, right? The concepts are going to have to exist here. All right, we're going to need the concept of A. We're going to need the concept of B. And we're going to need the concept of C in order to intelligibly make a decision of choosing A, B, or C, right? So there has to be some form of actuality, is what I'm saying. You have to have the actuality which is present in the decision in order to cause the effect, right? And the same thing's going to be true with, like, say, radioactive decay, and you have a beta or alpha particle that's ejected, or electron or whatever. You have a particle that's ejected. That particle is going to, due to the conservation of matter and energy, is going to have to exist in some sense in the atom. And the proportionate actuality is going to have to exist there. All right? So that's what I'm talking about. And so and not only that, but the effect is going to have its own parts, right? So I don't know if A is eating a steak, right? And we chose to eat a steak instead of eating a salad or dessert. Then that's going to be composed of various different parts. The steak, the fork, knife, yourself. A is going your actual choice and action of eating a steak is going to be composed of multiple parts, and all of that actuality is going to be dependent. So the point is, yeah, there's still a cause here. It's just not determining which effect is going to come about.
So, for some context, we are talking about Oppy's objection from arguing about gods, where he argues that the second premise of the first way, which is that things which are in the process of change are being changed by another, is highly controversial, since the choices of agents on a libertarian free will view would be changes which are not brought about by something else. You should probably watch my original response to TV if you haven't already, if you want more context in the dialectic here. Now, TD says that libertarian free choices or actions would still depend on concepts. The problem is, I have no idea what it means for an event to depend on a concept, right? That's just unintelligible to me. How could a concept have an explanatory relation in any sense, be it causal or metaphysical grounding, to an event in concrete reality? I just don't have a clue at all what that could even mean, and it just seems like a category error. A concept just isn't the sort of thing that can bear an explanatory relation in the sense TD requires. At the very least, TD doesn't explain the idea in any way that makes it intelligible to me, so that part is just totally unclear to me. Now then he says that the effect will depend on different parts, the effect of the action, that is, and the different objects involved in the effect of the action will be dependent, such as if we're assuming the choice or the action is eating steak, then the steak and the fork will be dependent objects. Now that might be true, but it's also orthogonal to the discussion, right? The point at issue is not whether the objects involved are ontologically dependent. What's at issue is, on libertarianism, what explains an agent's choice, right? That is, what explains the event of an agent choosing A over the set of alternatives she could have chosen instead. Presumably, the mental act of a choice for a libertarian agent is a process of change, so, per the first way, it must be brought about by something. But on libertarianism, nothing brings it about that an agent chooses A over B. The existence of the agent, the prior psychological states of the agent, the laws of nature, the external antecedent pressures, everything could obtain, and the agent could have chosen B instead. So ex hypothesi, none of that would explain why the agent chose A. Nothing could. So the idea is, the event of a libertarian agent choosing A would be a chancy process of change which is not brought about by anything else. So if libertarianism is true, we would then have a counterexample to the second premise of the first way.
Okay, so it seems like he has a misunderstanding that efficient causes are going to be not per se causal chains. Like the second way has nothing to do with per se causal chains. Well, let's see if that's true here. So this is from Edward Phaser. He points out that Aquinas rules out the second way for the same reason that the infinite regress is ruled out in the first way. It says that what he has in mind here is a causal series ordered per se, not a causal series ordered per accidents. So this is from Edward Phaser's book, Aquinas: A Beginner's Guide, for those who want to look into this. So it's simply not true that the efficient causes are not per se. And secondly, Graham Oppy, the reason why I went back to the second way is because he addresses that first, and he addresses the infinite regress there, and then in the first way, when he's talking about that, he basically says, oh, well, Aquinas makes the same errors that he makes inside the second way. And he basically just references back to his issues in the second way. So I dealt with the infinite regress in the second way because he goes into more detail. That's it.
So it's certainly possible that I didn't oopsie in my original video by mentioning per se chains, though if that's the case, I'd say it's excusable, since with how we usually think about efficient causes in Aristotle's sense, we're not typically thinking about a per se causal chain. So for example, my grandparents are an efficient cause of my ultimately coming to be, but my grandparents still continually sustain my existence and my ability to act from time to time. Another standard example of an efficient cause is that a carpenter is an efficient cause of a table, but the table's concurrent actuality is not sustained by the carpenter. So I took the second way to be an argument about efficient causes in this sense, and I interpreted Oppy to be taking it to be an argument about efficient causes in this sense too. But TD cites Edward Fazer saying that it actually has to do with an essentially ordered, in other words, per se series. So maybe that's wrong. In that case, though, I have a hard time seeing how the second way would at all be an independent argument for the first way, but whatever. Either way, even if what Aquinas has in mind is an essentially ordered series, Aquinas' particular argument against infinite regress of causes, which Oppy addresses in the particular quote TD paraphrases in his original video, is a failure for the reasons Oppy states, and TD's response to Oppy remains irrelevant. So just to quote Aquinas' argument, quote, now, it's not possible to proceed to infinity in efficient causes, for if we arrange in order all efficient causes, the first is the cause of the intermediate, and the intermediate the cause of the last, whether the intermediate be many or only one. But if we remove a cause, the effect is removed. Therefore, if there is no first among efficient causes, neither will there be a last or an intermediate. End quote. This argument, which again is the argument Aquinas uses to show that there cannot be an infinite regress of causes in the second way, simply doesn't work. Aquinas points out that in a finite series of causes, the earliest intermediate is caused by the first item in the series, so if you remove the first item, you don't get the later items. However, in an infinite series, every item would be caused by an earlier item, and there is no first item. So the first cause being removed in the sense of an infinite series would not entail the removal of the later items or the effect. So Aquinas' argument against an infinite regress in the first way might work, the idea being you can't have an actuality derived from another if nothing in the series has actuality in itself, which, actually is something I'd probably question, but that's a separate topic. But even if that argument does work, his argument against an infinite regress in the second way, which Oppy addresses, is nonetheless unsound.
So he's saying that a thing exists whenever its properties are instantiated. So is it something like we have a thing, and then we have its properties, and the properties are instantiated? I don't know, put an I there for instantiation. Or we can say that that there's just properties, and things are identical to the properties, and the properties are instantiated. Okay, in any case, all right, so we're going to say, sure, okay, a thing exists if its properties are instantiated. I'm fine with that. And I mean, it's not, maybe I would have some objections to it, but it's not, I don't see it as being hugely important for this discussion here. My question is going to be, okay, so we have two things here, right? We have properties, and then we have instantiation. Now you can say, well, okay, but these are actually just one thing. Okay. So I don't know. Let's try this. Let's say we have whiteness. Here, let's actually. Yeah, I don't know. Let's just go with whiteness, and then we have the instantiation of whiteness, and you can say, well, no, whiteness is just identical to the instantiation of whiteness. Another way we can put this is we can just say, okay, well, by well, yeah, another way we can put this, we can say instantiation equals essay, and that's what we mean by essay, right? So I'm not really sure how this is going to be an issue. We say instantiation is essay. Okay, so we have whiteness and we have essay, and so all this seems, and then if we say, all we have to do is we have to say, okay, whiteness is, right, whiteness is essence. I won't write out essence, but whiteness is essence. So we have, I guess I can write out. Anyway, whiteness is essence. Should have typed that out. Anyway, so we have white instantiation is essay, whiteness is essence. That's how I would think about these two things. Okay, and then you can just, so I mean, I can do this, right? It's just different labels for the same thing. All right, so all you would be saying is, all right, well, there's not really a distinction between these two, instantiation and whiteness. All these things are equal. So I don't know, whiteness equals instantiation. Great. All right. That's a great claim to make, but it's not really moving us anywhere forwards. Like, I mean, saying instantiation instead of essay, or saying whiteness instead of essence is not changing anything. You're still making the same claim about essence and existence, that you're claiming that they're identical, and we're starting from the same kind of position where we're asking, is essence and existence identical, or is it distinct? And I say this because they present this like I'm presenting some kind of, I'm starting out with some kind of radical, crazy idea, some very controversial idea of what existence is. But look, all I'm saying is essence and existence are either identical or they're not. That's where I'm starting out with. And I'm saying that, okay, we do need this principle of existence to distinguish something from non-existence, because otherwise it would be identical to existence due to the principle of indiscernibility of identicals.
TD is pretty far away from tracking the objection here. Well, let's back up. So this relates to my point in my original video about the first way being parasitic upon thick ontology. Thick ontology is any view where there are multiple ways or modes of existence or being. Existence is equivocal or analogical, in other words. My point is, we seem to have no reason to think thick ontology is true, and there are reasons to think it's probably false. But on Aquinas, his arguments depend on thick ontology being true. In other words, if thin ontology, which, as you might guess, is the negation of thick ontology, is true, Aquinas' arguments, including the first way, can't even get off the ground. So my point would be that you would have an undercutting defeater here. Now, my view is that existence is a second-order property of properties. This is known as the Frege-Russell-Quine view of existence. I deny that existence is a first-order predicate, in other words. So to spell this out, suppose I want to say that a spider exists. There are a couple ways we can state this in first-order logic, which I have on the screen here. One would be to say there is an x such that x is a spider. That's the first formula you see there. Another would be, it's not the case that for all x, it's not the case that x is a spider. And that's all it would be to say a spider exists. It would be to say that one of these first two formulas we have on the screen here are true. And there's nothing further to the story than that. Whereas a thick ontologist will want to say something like, to say a spider exists would translate to there is an X such that X is a spider and X exists, which would be the bottom formula here. So basically, I take a view where existence is nothing over and above quantification over some property or cluster of properties or definite description or what have you. When you say some property exists, you're not adding anything to the content of the given property. You wouldn't be saying that the property exemplifies anything, be it instantiation or essay or whatever. Properties don't exemplify instantiation or any existence like predicates. Rather, there is the second order relation, which is that they are or are not instantiated. There is or is not something which has the property. In other words, we'd be saying that the existence of some property P is the second order property of P being instantiated by at least one object. Existence is not a substantive property. It is not a first order predicate, on this view at least. It's not something which objects exemplify, which distinguishes them from nothing, which is what TD likes to say, or which can be either derivable or non-derivable. TD seems to just not understand that the view is sort of deflationary view, where existence is cashed out only in propositions which begin with quantifiers such as there is some, there is at least one, or it's not the case that there are zero. It eliminates entirely the Thomistic concepts and vocabulary TD needs to employ and bring to the table to make his arguments. What I reject is the idea that existence isn't exemplifiable altogether, which things have in themselves or from another, or existence as the kind of thing which is ontologically distinct from and can be a feature of essences, which is something he sort of needs for his arguments, and relevant to this, his objections to Mackie to even get started. So TD's response to me here just doesn't seem to be tracking the point at all. So I guess there's not much more that can be said, and he's just sort of not engaging with what's being said.
I will say that on my view, I mean, concepts are like, well, on the Thomistic view, concepts are not what we actually know. What we know are things. And yeah, so concepts actually do exist. They're what refer to other things. So, for example, you can have the concept of truth teller, and that concept refers to truth teller. And whether or not it exists is going to depend on like whether what it refers to actually exists. And so it's not completely correct to say that concepts don't exist. That's more based on like I don't know. It seems to be based on like a idealist idea of like what concepts are. That concepts are just only things inside of our heads, and you know, since the thing that it refers to doesn't exist, therefore that concept doesn't exist. I don't know. I would not think of it in that way.
So this is in regards to Frege's view that existence is applied to concepts, not individuals or objects. TD is once again confused here. So when I said concepts don't necessarily exist, what I meant is that the description or set of descriptors which furnish the content of a given concept might not exist. So for example, we have the concept of a unicorn which satisfies a set of descriptors, but it's then going to be a further question whether any existent object answers to the concept of unicorn. And me and TD will probably, presumably agree that the answer is probably not. So you can have a concept which does not have any referent in the actual world. This is relevant because from this we can say that concepts aren't the kind of things that will possess, in the Thomistic sense, existence in themselves or existence from another. Concepts are the kind of things which will necessarily have a referent. Concepts will either have instances or fail to have instances. So what he needs to say is that those things which are instances, those things which are objects, are the kinds of things that have existence in themselves or from another. But Once again, if existence is something that is applied to concepts, not objects, which is the Fregean view, it would follow that the Thomistic view is false.
Okay, well, I mean, the easy way to object to this is to point out that, well, okay, but I just presented a reason to believe that reality is actually set up this way, to where, you know, things have existence in themselves or in another. That is, well, they have the distinction between essence and existence. Essence is going to be potential with respect to existence, and so it's going to have it in this derived way, right? So, and any account that is contrary to this account is going to be false. Simple as.
Yeah, I reject that any of those claims have been justified in a way that should even be remotely convincing to someone who doesn't already share TD's background metaphysical commitments. Certainly they haven't been justified in a way that has moved me at all. Now, once again, what TD fails to get here is I've presented an undercutting defeater for the metaphysical assumptions his arguments rely on to even get off the ground, which is to say, thick ontology. TD merely asserting that he has shown that there is a distinction of derived existence and non-derived existence is nothing more than table pounding on his end. If you have an argument, TD, I'm waiting to see it, because one has not yet been forthcoming.
So what do we have here? We have the essence, which could be red or blue, and we have redness and blueness. In both cases, we have the ball, and in one case, we have a ball which is blue, and in another case, we have a ball which is red. What's the difference between these two? The actuality of blueness or the actuality of redness. So, this is why we say that the ball is indifferent to redness. Sorry about that. To redness or blueness. Because the ball remains the same throughout the process of change, right? So the actuality is going to be something different. So the essence is going to be, or substance, right, is going to be what remains the same throughout the change. It's going to be a ball throughout the change. And then the accident is going to be the color, right? So, throughout time, what do we have? Over here we have redness. Over here we have blueness. There is no blueness in here. There's no actuality for blueness. I mean, maybe there could be some kind of internal chemical reaction or something, but right here, in this case, we have no actuality for blueness, and then somebody paints it, for example, and now it has the actuality for blueness. But in a sense, there's still the potentiality for blueness, because in itself, the ball is going to be potential for the blueness in itself. If you consider the ball in itself without a color, that's what it's going to be. And so there's actuality actualizing at every moment the potential for blueness, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. Even if there were some, out at the same time as the ball, there was this, let's say there's a paint bucket down here that's blue, right? And so there is the actuality there, and then it gets onto the ball, and then so the actuality does exist there. I don't know if that's what he's going to be thinking. Even if, okay, so this is the prior cause that causes this, okay, but there's still something actualizing. The blueness is still there actualizing it, right? Because if not, then the ball's not going to be blue. If you don't have the paint on the surface of the ball, it's not going to be blue. I don't think this is begging the question, because this has to be the case. It's necessary. The ball has to be indifferent to blueness in order to change to blueness. Because like, let's say it's not indifferent, okay? Then it's determined, right? So it's either going to be determined such that it cannot be blue, or such that it's already blue. And then, so like if we say this is already blue, and it's necessarily blue, then actually what's going to be is that this is going to be identical to blue. But anyway, the point is it can't change into blue because it's already blue, right? Okay. And if it's determined such that it can't be blue, then it can't change to blue either. So it has to be in itself indifferent to blue.
Alright, so just to keep track of the threads of the dialectic here, this is in regards to Sobel. It relates to Sobel's objection to the first way, that neglects the possibility of there being self-moving things. Now, TD claimed that you can't have self-moving objects like a water boiling itself, because water in itself would have to be indifferent to the actuality of boiling. And then I pointed out that this doesn't really address Sobel's critique, but rather just reasserts that self-movers aren't possible. So now that we got that context of the way, what to think of TD's objection here? Well, not gonna lie, I'm kind of confused by TD's response here. He uses the example of a ball, which changes from red to blue, and he claims that the ball would have to be indifferent to blueness, because if it's not indifferent, then it has to be determinate with respect to blueness, in which case it'll already be blue. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got from TD's response here. But I don't understand how TD is ruling out the possibility of the ball being self-actualizing with respect to its color change. Suppose the ball isn't indifferent to blueness because it's not already blue, okay? And because that's how he defines indifference in this context. Okay, but why can't it be that the red ball's antecedent states at T1 entail that at T2 the ball will become blue, right? So there would be an entailment from the state of the ball at T1, not that it will be blue at T1, but that it will be blue at T2. This would be an actuality in the ball, which is the actuality to become blue at T2, and this actuality causes the blueness to become actualized in the ball. So its antecedent actualities entail its future actualities. This seems like a possibility in the sense that I don't see any logical contradiction here, nor do I see any sort of absurdity or extreme counterintuitiveness that would motivate the charge of this being some sort of metaphysical impossibility. So what is the argument against the possibility of self-actualizing objects in this sense? At the very least, even if most objects do not satisfy the conditions for being self-actualizing, the earliest items in causal reality could have the feature of being self-actualizing, in which case the inference to an unactualized actualizer, let alone what TD actually wants to get to, which is a purely actual actualizer, would be blocked. So TD needs to explain why this isn't a possibility, which means he needs to show a contradiction or derive some sort of absurdity from it. Otherwise, I think Sobel's original critique still goes through. So that's pretty much all I had to say on this regard.
Okay, so this, I don't know, because here's the thing. If we're talking about it being a whole, then it's going to be acting as a whole. Otherwise, in what sense is it really a whole? So I'm not sure that I really accept his position. But he's saying that really it's not acting as a whole, it's acting as a part. And so I think that his view is going to be more that these other potentialities are like accidents, I guess, of God. And so maybe what would be more relevant to this objection would be Article 6, where he argues that there can't be any accidents in God. And so he argues this for a few different reasons. The first is that there's a sense in which he says there's a sense in which something that is potential is made actual by its parts or by its accidents. And that's one objection. Let me just kind of explain my general thing, and I think this is coming from a general Thomistic metaphysics. in order for you to add accidents to God, it would require him to be lacking something, right? So God would have to lack the would have to lack and this kind of goes back to the whole acting as a whole thing, right? God would have to lack the what its potential towards. So instead of acting as a pure act, it would just act as something that heats, for example. And because if it were only actual with respect to heating. And the thing is, this would require it to act as a composite inside of the Thomistic view of metaphysics, because there's going to need to be a principle that limits the actuality that it has to this particular kind of act, which is going to be that of heating. Due to, what we've been talking about before, the principle of indiscernibility of identicals, or indiscernibles. The principle of the identity of indiscernibles. It's kind of a tongue twister there. Due to that principle, you need an additional feature in addition to existence in order to distinguish between them. And this is going to be a limiting principle for reasons that I've explained elsewhere. So see the Metaphysics of the First Wave video, for example. So in this sense, as it says down here, it really will be acting as a whole, because it's not going to be acting as something that just is purely existence. It's going to be acting as something which is existence plus the limiting essence, which limits it to this particular act of heating. So I think this objection would apply in that sense as well. Yeah. So yeah, for that reason, I don't think that you can really have God be a composite, even with accidents, because in order to have an accident, you would have to have some kind of room for additional actuality, which you can't have if it's unlimited. If it's an unlimited act of pure existence. So that's going to be my response to that part.
So I don't really have much to say here. I'm having a bit of a hard time tracking his points on this particular point. I think a lot of this is probably us talking past each other because we're coming at this from completely different angles and schools of thought. I'm coming at this from a more contemporary analytic metaphysical framework, whereas he's coming at it from a more medieval Thomistic metaphysical framework. So we're almost speaking different languages essentially. But I'm not entirely clear on why the objection in question turns on the being in question, or God. I would say it wouldn't be God, but we can just say God having accidents. But we can assume it does. I guess I just don't find the arguments that the being could not have accidents really persuasive. The reasons he gives seems to rely on the assumption that the being is one of pure actuality or an unlimited act of being. But that's pretty much precisely what's being called into question with Joe's objection. The stipulated being is not of pure act. And the whole point is, for all the argument establishes, we don't need an entire concrete being of pure actuality. It's enough that we can perhaps have a first being that has potencies or potential properties which are ontologically posterior to its actualities or actual properties. So act is ontologically prior to potency, and nothing would be ontologically prior to the first being. So TD would have to show the issue with this view. And additionally, I guess I don't see the problem with a part acting, essentially, and it's not being the case that the act belongs to the whole being, essentially. So we can take some easy examples of this. We can say my heart acts in the sense that it performs its causal activity or its function of pumping blood, and my heart is part of me, but the act of my heart pumping blood isn't my act qua intentional agent. So, in an analogous way, we can have a concrete being that has actualities which act in the sense of, serve as an explanatory terminus for all, potentialities, or be the first actualities which are prior to all potentialities. But this act is not essential qua the whole being. But I don't know, maybe I'm confused here. This isn't a hill I die on or a point I'm very confident on. Like I said, I'm not really in deep into the whole Thomistic literature, so I don't know. For another, so it would not be fundamental, changeless, and ontologically independent in every respect.
Yeah, and then it wouldn't be the first cause, so... So, yeah, I mean, I explained this earlier in the video, but yeah, if it has potentialities in other respects, then it's not going to be the first cause. It's going to be... it's going to depend on something else. So you're going to ultimately have to get to something that isn't potential in any way.
Right, it wouldn't be the first cause, but that's only because there isn't a the first cause on the view outlined. It would be a first cause, in virtue of serving as a terminus for a particular causal chain, but it wouldn't be a first cause for some other chain of potentialities moving towards actuality. Something else would. What needs to be shown in the first place is that there needs to be the first cause, rather than it's just being sufficient that there are a set of first causes which terminate separate causal chains involving motion or change. It is this claim which remains to be motivated and which TD has yet to justify.
Maybe he's thinking we have something that is actual, but has no potentiality. Because if it does have potentiality, then that potentiality is going to have to depend on something else that's actual. And if that thing has actuality, right, or has another potentiality, then we're going to need something else to actualize that potentiality, and so on until we get to something that just is its own actuality. Now, maybe what he's saying is, okay, sure, but maybe this is potential with respect to whiteness, actual with respect to heat. This is, let's say this is potential respect to, or actual with respect to heat, so that it can, or no, actual with respect to whiteness, sorry. Let's do this. Actual with respect to whiteness, and potential with respect to shape, whatever. And then this is actual with respect to shape. Okay, so in this case, okay, in a sense it would be purely actual, right? Because it wouldn't have any potentiality, which is all that I'm trying to argue with this argument here.
You see, this is frustrating because he actually comes close to grasping the point here, but he still ends up, ultimately missing the point anyways. So no, nothing here would be purely actual. The inference to a purely actual being would be blocked. There wouldn't need to be anything with pure actuality. Everything could have potentialities, but all potentialities will have actuality prior to it. That's fine, since each causal chain involving potentiality moving towards actuality will have a terminus. But each terminus might have potentialities in other respects, which will have actuality prior to it, ex hypothesi, in a separate terminus. So you don't actually get anything purely actual, right? There's no purely actual being. TD needs to give an argument that you need to have a terminus which is a purely actual being with no potentialities at all, but of course he still hasn't done that. Additionally, even if we have a terminus which lacks any potentialities, which I want to stress is a claim that hasn't been justified, but even if we do need that, TD hasn't shown that we get a first cause of change as such, rather than different first causes for different series of pure se changes. You could have an actuality called heat, which is responsible for the per se change of all objects towards heat, and you can have a separate actuality called coldness as well, which is responsible for the movement of all objects towards coldness, and neither of these actualities have any potentialities, right? TD hasn't shown that you need a first cause of all of change, rather than there being a cause for different series of per se change, which are themselves unchangeable, or at least do not themselves change in respect of the disposition or property factive to the per se series in question. This is again the issue in desperate need of motivation, which I thought I made perfectly clear in my original video, but despite this, I don't see any justification from TD for the claim. So again, just to be clear, it's consistent with the first way that you have some chain C that has a first member T, which is responsible for all the changes or reduction of potency to act in that chain, or at least is the first cause which sets all changes in the chain into motion and is not itself caused to change in the respect of the chain in question, or perhaps is not caused to change at all. I don't think that really matters. But what hasn't been shown is that there is a first member G that is the first causal chains of per se changes. So, being perfectly clear, this is foremost the claim which I'm saying has not been justified, and until it has been justified, the first way in TD's defense of it just isn't successful. And that's pretty much it. I just want a justification for the claim, and I haven't seen one. But, now I guess I'll just finish this off by addressing TD's reasons that there cannot be two beings of pure actuality.
We have something that's purely actual in itself. Go back to Parmenides. Nothing is outside of existence. You need some distinguishing factor. So if you had two of these things that are purely actual in themselves, what's the difference between them? They're going to be the same unless you have, over here you have a different, let's say, hold on, sorry. Let's say over here we have feature C, and then we have over here we have feature B. And so we have actuality plus C, actuality plus B. And we have, actuality plus C, actuality plus B. We have two composites. These are distinguished. The actuality of C is distinguished by C. The actuality of B is distinguished by B. And you have, basically what you have here is going to be essence and existence. Because there's going to have to be a limit on actuality, because anything that's outside of actuality is not going to exist. It's going to be non-existent. So there has to be a limitation. Go back to my video on the metaphysics of the first way. I explained that in much clearer. Like right here, I'm just kind of going off the cuff. So you can't have two of them. You can only have one. That's why you can only have one pure actuality, because it can't have any additional feature. Otherwise, it'll be a limitation on it, and it won't be just pure actuality.
He starts off by saying that two beings of pure actuality, in order to be distinct, would have to have a distinguishing feature. Now this assumes what's known as Leibniz law, or the identity of indiscernibles, which is a bit controversial. You have philosophers like Max Black who famously argued against it, but we can leave that aside. That pretty much every thesis in philosophy is going to be controversial, and I probably accept the identity of indiscernibles anyways, so who cares. In any case, TD basically parrots Phaser as to why there cannot be two purely actual beings, because for them to be distinct, they would have to be distinct in virtue of having some limitation. In other words, they would need to have some unactualized potential properties that make them distinct, in which case they wouldn't be purely actual. But I don't think this argument is compelling. I don't see why the distinguishing features couldn't just be differences in features of actual properties. Plausibly actual objects, that is, objects in the actual world, may have distinguishing features in virtue of their actual properties. So, for example, a human, and a house, and a star, and an elephant, and a giraffe, and a black hole may have different potentialities from time to time, but also have different actual properties. Like I have the property of having the actuality of organs, these are actual properties, and blood vessels and nerves, which have different functional roles, contributing to an integrated biological system. They also have the actual property of being an intentional agent with consciousness. A star, for example, lacks these actual properties, but has other actual properties which I lack, such as being larger than planets, being self-luminous, the property of being 6,000 degrees Kelvin, the property of being composed of mostly hydrogen and helium. These are actual properties which distinguish a human from a star. So it seems clear that objects can be distinguished in virtue of different actual properties, not merely different potential properties. You don't have to appeal to limitations or unactualized potentials to distinguish objects. The claim that they need to be distinguished by, having unactualized potential properties just seems unmotivated, and if anything, just seems to be false. So yeah, that's it. This was my response to Thomistic Disputations. I thank TD for providing the response to the video, for the engagement, even though I don't find his objections, I don't think they work, but that's fine. It's good to contribute to the discourse. Now my next video is probably going to be a response to Christian idealism's most recent response video to me on the problem of evil, so stay tuned for that. It'll probably be a collaboration video. But that's it. Goodbye, YouTube.